mother and daughter's tense relationship boils over. The daughter leaves home, then disappears.
We track down family members, close friends.
2 weeks later, the runaway's mother also disappears.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go.
That's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Only one woman is found alive.
We had numerous investigators out there with crime scenes sifting through dirt for 3 days.
Detectives are determined to bring the killer to justice, no matter how long it takes. Alton, Illinois is an all-American town on the Mississippi, just upriver from St. Louis. It's around 3 in the afternoon at the Eunice Smith Nursing Home, where 47-year-old Bonnie Woodward, a hard-working nurse and mother of 4, is finishing up her day. A long staff meeting has kept her there later than usual, and she seems eager to leave. However, Bonnie doesn't arrive home that afternoon.
Everyone in Bonnie's family, they were suspicious. This was not like her behavior.
Her boyfriend, Gary, has been waiting for hours, and all of his anxious calls go straight to voicemail. Though usually home by 3, Bonnie sometimes joins her sister to unwind during happy hour. But tonight, as the clock ticks well past the dinner hour and closer to last call, Gary grows increasingly anxious.
And it was family members that went looking for Bonnie when she did not come home from work.
He heads to several local bars, scanning the parking lot, hoping that he might spot her truck. But he doesn't find it, so Gary heads home, hoping that Bonnie simply lost track of time and that she'll be home soon. Gary is frantic when the phone rings around 6 a.m. Given the hour, he hopes that Bonnie has a good explanation for why she didn't return home. But there's an unexpected voice on the other end of the line. It's Bonnie's boss, wondering why she hasn't shown up for work.
She wouldn't have just disappeared. She had children in the home. One had disabilities, and she checked in regularly. She was a woman who had the same job for a couple of decades, only called in sick 2 or 3 times, just not a person that would normally go off the radar. So that's what led the police to suspect that there was foul play.
Gary does the only thing he could think to do: go to the place where Bonnie was last seen. Much to his shock, Bonnie's truck is still parked in the employee lot, and he spots something off. Bonnie has left her windows down, something she would never do. So, Gary goes to alert the police.
Her boyfriend at the time, Gary Wilmarth, reported her as a missing person to us. And at that point, the patrol officers notified our detective division due to some circumstances in the case that were concerning, and a few detectives started coming out and working down some leads on trying to find her.
Detective Mike O'Neill with the Alton Police Department takes in the information about Bonnie's disappearance. At first, Detective O'Neill wonders if Bonnie just might be taking some time for herself.
More often than not, if a person is missing, it's usually not a suspicious circumstance thing where there's foul play. It's they left to go do something, didn't tell anybody about it, or they just need to get away for a little bit.
When Detective O'Neill reaches out to close friends and family, everyone insists Bonnie would never leave without any notice.
It really struck people that this was not Bonnie Woodward. This was not like her to just disappear. She had a family at home. Things were very routine with her, with being at work and returning home. and this was very out of character.
Shocked by her sudden disappearance, Bonnie's family pleads for her safe return.
Whoever has my sister, please let her go.
You let my sister go, and I'll come and get her. I want my sister.
Investigators take a closer look at the man who reports Bonnie missing, her boyfriend, Gary.
A lot of times if there is foul play in a situation like this, it's usually somebody that would know that person.
They tracked a lot of people down. She was living with her boyfriend at the time. They interviewed him extensively.
If Bonnie took off, it's only been, I'm thinking, once or twice. She went 2 blocks over to the bar and called me up and said, I'm gonna have me a couple drinks and chill out or whatever. And
on the day this happened, which would have been the 25th, right, roughly?
Right.
Did you go anywhere at all around the time that she would have been home from work?
No, I was there. Her daughter was at the house.
But an alibi is only good if it checks out. So Detective O'Neill must speak with the person Gary claims he was with, Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer.
Where were you at Friday? When this all came up?
Me and Gary and my little brother Aaron and my kids were at my mom's house waiting for her.
Did Gary ever leave?
No.
No. Does he drive? Does Gary drive?
No, he don't have a vehicle to drive.
Okay.
He
So
never
he was
left. He was home all day long.
With Gary's alibi verified, Detective O'Neill moves quickly to figure out who was the last person to see Bonnie leaving work.
I drove by her work, and her truck was sitting out there. And I asked him, I was just like, is Bonnie Woodward still working by any chance? Maybe she worked over. And they're like, no, we seen her leave earlier, around, a little bit after the work meeting.
He soon learns that Bonnie's co-worker saw something out of the ordinary. Bonnie getting into a silver sedan.
I saw him and Bonnie out there, and for some, I didn't see anything strange, but it kind of seemed strange because I guess I had never seen the man before. He was a white male. He looked like he wasn't very tall, maybe 5'8", 5'9" or so. His hair was a salt and pepper, more grayer than black.
She also noticed that this person was associated to a silver or gray Chevrolet Malibu that he had on the parking lot at the time.
It's not much to go on, but it makes Detective O'Neill wonder if Bonnie might have had a new love interest spicing up her life. Or perhaps she was meeting a former flame.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had, and that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here.
Then we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
"47-year-old nurse Bonnie Woodward is last seen getting into a silver car with an unknown man. The clock is ticking as Detective O'Neill tries to locate the missing woman, who has seemingly vanished without a trace in the small town of Alton, Illinois. But he must also consider that Bonnie may not be missing at all. She might be having an affair.
There were a lot of members of her family who talked about an ex-boyfriend that she had.
A week before she disappears, Bonnie sends a friend request on social media to an old boyfriend. But this isn't just any old boyfriend. It's Bonnie's first love that at the time turned into a long, tumultuous relationship.
They interviewed him as well.
But it turns out to be a short interview.
Did you talk to Bonnie? No, she just wanted to, be my friend on Facebook, and I just accepted her. Other than that, I had no communications with her.
Officers learn he last saw Bonnie in 2002, and he doesn't own a silver sedan. The recent friend request is just a curiosity about an old flame. Bonnie's daughter, Jennifer, has an idea who it might be, her mom's ex-boyfriend,
My mom is not the type of person that's just gonna hop in the car with somebody and leave her truck there, you know, unless she's expecting to come right back.
Who does this guy sound like to you?
It's Chester. I mean, I don't like to pinpoint a guy out, but Chester fits every description. And like the silver Impala, his mom and dad has a silver Impala.
According to Jennifer, the two had a rocky relationship that ended when Gary entered her mother's life. And Chester also fits the physical description of the mystery man from the parking lot.
You dated her for how long, sir?
We started dating and I was with her for probably a year. She kicked me out and then next thing I know, Gary's living there.
Despite a history of domestic violence and a bad breakup, Chester is genuinely concerned about Bonnie's whereabouts.
You think she's okay? Right now, what's your gut saying?
I'm scared.
Okay.
You know, because she's never done this before that I've ever known.
But a call to his employer, a local construction company, verifies that he was at work when Bonnie went missing.
I hope to God nothing wrong, and if I see her or hear anything, I'll let you know.
Investigators fear they are running out of leads when Detective O'Neill discovers that Bonnie isn't the only person who has gone missing from the Woodward household.
The main thing that we were able to gather from those interviews, and especially with family and friends and the current boyfriend, was that she had a 17-year-old stepdaughter, Heather Woodward, who was recently reported missing or as a runaway.
My little sister, okay, is 17 years old. She's got a missing persons report like 2 to 2.5 weeks ago.
And that's when they really knew, hey, something's going on here. We have a woman that's missing, and her stepdaughter had been reported missing days before this as well.
Could these disappearances be connected?
There was nothing definitive that said the two were related, but we certainly felt that that was something a path we needed to go on.
According to Bonnie's family, Heather might be staying with a trusted high school teacher.
She kept saying she was gonna move in with this teacher.
This is the daughter?
Yeah. And Bonnie said, no, you're not. And I mean, this went on and on and on. Bonnie talked to the principal of school. She said, that's not gonna happen.
We narrowed in on a teacher in a neighboring city called East Alton that Heather was last seen with her.
Detective O'Neill tracks down the teacher, who at first seems a bit guarded. While friends and family describe Bonnie as a loving mother of 4, Christine paints a different picture.
I had Heather in Algebra 1 class as a freshman, and she has been very vocal to myself and all the other teachers of the abuse that goes on at home.
She tells the detective that Bonnie and Heather had a volatile relationship, one that went downhill when Heather's father died 8 years ago, leaving Bonnie as sole guardian. While the relationship was generally bad, tensions flared in recent weeks. Heather and Bonnie constantly fight over Heather's wish to attend college. Christine hopes she could provide a safe haven for the teen until emotions cool down.
And it was during that interview with her that she said that Heather had left her residence and she didn't know where she went.
Bonnie called us the night of the 16th. She left a message on my phone that she was coming tomorrow to get Heather, and Heather should pack her stuff. So, and I did tell her she had to go back home. So, and she cried most of the night.
And then whenever you came back on the 17th, she was gone.
Right.
Locating Bonnie's stepdaughter is now Detective O'Neill's #1 priority.
We just knew that our investigation was going in 2 separate angles. 1, we needed to find Heather, and 2, we needed to find Bonnie and see what the situation was with either one or if there was any relationship between those 2.
But without any clear leads, O'Neill worries that both cases might run out of steam. About a week after Bonnie goes missing, police get an unexpected phone call. Heather Woodward just walked into the town library.
She showed up at the East Alton Library on her 18th birthday on July 3rd, 2010, and basically said, I'm Heather Woodward. I've been reported as a runaway.
It's been 8 days since Bonnie Woodward went missing after leaving work. Investigators have exhausted all viable leads when Bonnie's runaway stepdaughter, Heather, suddenly returns. Detective O'Neill wonders if the stepdaughter may have been involved in Bonnie's disappearance.
At that point, I went in to interview Heather and talk to her about where she'd been.
Okay, Heather, this is Detective Mike O'Neill from All Police Department. We just need to ask you a few things here.
The first initial interview with Heather was, I can't think of a better word than weird. Heather was for an 18-year-old, was very immature. She was holding a teddy bear with her. Her tone of voice sounded like a little girl's.
I packed my stuff and I left. I wasn't going home for 2 weeks to be kicked out again.
And then what happened?
And then I went to stay at a friend's house.
Okay, and who was that?
Just a friend. Don't want to get him in trouble.
Detective O'Neill wonders if this teen has something to hide.
Because you understand that Bonnie's missing right now, we don't have a clue where she's at, so anything that would help us, any other leads or information would be great.
They don't know nothing. They don't like Bonnie. I don't want to know where Bonnie's at.
Heather seemed upset about the overall situation, but in talking to her, it was just trying to assess where she's been, what she's been doing, why she took off.
Heather claims she has a lot of reasons for running away. Her relationship with Bonnie has gone from toxic to downright poisonous in the weeks before Bonnie's disappearance.
Bonnie can be mean, and sometimes she hits. Bonnie decided to tell me to pack everything and just get out. I was afraid to go home.
But it isn't just typical mother-daughter tension. Heather explains that Bonnie refuses to support her financially after she turns 18, when her father's death benefit checks would come to an end. Heather wants to apply to college, but Bonnie refuses to help. While this tracks with what Detective O'Neill has heard so far, it still doesn't answer the biggest question. Where was Heather when her mother disappeared?
And at that point, all we knew is she left the teacher's house and nobody had seen her.
Heather eventually told police who she had been with during that time.
I stayed with some people from the church.
So it's Nathan Carroll's family?
She provided information saying that she was with the Carroll family. She ultimately had attended church with the Carroll son, and that's how she kind of began to know the family. She identified Roger and Monica Carroll as being the parents.
In order to verify Heather's story, investigators head to the Carroll home to interview the church family who welcome Heather into their home.
After interviewing them, they acknowledged that Heather was with them. They acknowledged that they knew Heather was a runaway. And it was ultimately just their explanation, and especially Roger's explanation, was based on things that Heather had told them. They were keeping her safe.
Right off the bat, Heather's alibi checks out, but investigators are stuck by a couple of uncanny details. Roger Carroll fits the physical description of the Salt and Pepper mystery man, and there's a silver car parked in his driveway.
So those were obviously some key points that we were looking at, but still there was nothing there to 100% say that he was the person, or they did have that involvement in her disappearance.
But in order to make sure, Detective O'Neill asks the Carrolls to come down to the station to talk further.
They brought all three of the Carrolls into the police department and interviewed them all. They said that Heather had been staying with them, that they don't know anything about Bonnie, that Heather reported that Bonnie was somewhat abusive to her, and they don't know Bonnie, had never seen Bonnie, didn't know where she lived or worked. Just basically, we know nothing about Bonnie, but we had Heather with us.
Under questioning, Roger denies having ever met Bonnie Woodward. He is only trying to help his son's friend.
As far as Bonnie, you've never had a conversation with that woman, and you've never been face to face with that woman. You know where she lives, but you've never, other than you've driven by there, like 2 times, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Satisfied that Roger is being truthful, Detective O'Neill chalks up the similar hair and car to coincidence, but explains to the Carrolls that they are not entirely off the hook.
The 2 adult Carrolls, Roger and Monica, were charged with harboring a runaway and obstructing justice.
The couple are booked and fingerprinted, then sent home. Another lead in the case goes cold. Despite the setbacks, Detective O'Neill refuses to give up. He hopes to provide some form of closure to Bonnie's distraught family, who fear the worst.
We're still looking for Bonnie. We're still looking for any information related to her disappearance. And nothing. It just went silent with anything coming in.
As the weeks pass, fears grow Bonnie may never be found, dead or alive.
Then in September of 2010, we get the lead that cracks this thing wide open.
It gives me goosebumps to think about it. There was an extensive search, close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers.
We took numerous firearms from the house and a large amount of ammunition.
Weeks after running away, Heather Woodward returns, but her stepmother is still missing and now presumed dead. The church-going family who provide refuge to Heather appear to be good Samaritans, assisting a teen in distress. And just when the investigation seems to be turning ice cold, Detective O'Neill gets a phone call that flips the case on its head.
The Illinois State Police Crime Lab gets in contact with our department, and they notify us that there were fingerprints that we had obtained and sent to the lab for analysis. And of those prints, there were prints that matched up with Roger Carroll.
It's a stunning turn for the investigation, and no one is more surprised than Detective O'Neill.
During Roger's initial interview, he had said that he had never had contact with Bonnie. Based on our interpretation from that interview, there'd be no reason for him to have ever touched her vehicle. So at this point, we knew that he had at least provided false information.
It's enough to take Bonnie's case out of the deep freeze. The matched prints and Roger Carroll's connection to Heather are enough to obtain a search warrant for the Carrolls' property. The district attorney's office is also informed that the Carrolls are now under suspicion for Bonnie's presumed murder.
So after the police got the information that Roger Carroll's fingerprints matched Bonnie Woodward's car, there was an extensive search. Dozens, if not close to 40 or 50 law enforcement officers went to the Carroll property.
But this search will not be easy.
There's 60 acres of land there. We're just looking for anything at that point. We searched the vehicles, searched the house, searched the property for anything that may be linking Bonnie to that property or to that family. It was very difficult to search such a wide area for specific evidence.
Unfortunately, they don't find any trace of Bonnie, but do find something else that heightens their suspicions.
During that search, we took numerous firearms from the house. They had close to 30 firearms and a large amount of ammunition, more than I could even count, that was inside this house. But also we had to understand that this is a rural country area. You know, it's not too shocking for a family to collect guns and have a large amount of guns.
You got a lot of guns in the house, right?
A few.
A few. And you target practice, I guess, routinely?
Some. I not as much as I used to, just because the ammo's got.
What do you usually target practice with, handguns or long guns or?
It depends. I mean, a little of each.
And it was at that point Roger was interviewed, and more specifically this time, Had he ever had contact with Bonnie? Had he ever touched her truck?
Any chance your fingerprints would be on Bonnie's car? On the driver's door? Like all over it?
Oh, no way, no.
No chance?
No.
Okay.
And then when faced with the situation of fingerprints of his were on her truck on the driver's side door, basically in the same area that it was reported that this unknown person was talking to her at the end of her work shift, why were those prints there?
Any chance your DNA would be all over that driver's door?
No. No way.
And how do we explain it if it is?
Yeah. Then I've been framed. I mean, no, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that car door or my DNA is on that car door. There just is no way.
Your prints are on that door.
Confronted with this damning fingerprint evidence, Roger doubles down on his story.
His explanation was they weren't his. He had never touched her truck, and the only thing he can come up with that he was been framed. And no other explanation to show for why those prints were there.
Roger Carroll was charged with a felony obstructing justice, and that was pretty much the end of the conversation at that point.
Investigators have to answer a confounding question. Why would Roger Carroll want to kill Bonnie Woodward? Could Heather have encouraged him? Investigators interview Heather, who is now attending college.
Has there ever been any point where he has ever seen Bonnie that you know of?
No.
Has there been any point where he has ever seen her car, at least?
So in that interview, we made it clear to her about the fingerprint that were found on the truck.
What we're trying to tell you right now, there's new physical evidence in this case. That's why we're recontacting you. Okay, and this is what we need to know.
There is no reason for his prints to be on Bonnie's truck.
No, there's not.
She seemed genuinely shocked that there would be that contact. She didn't know of any circumstance in which Roger would have ever touched her vehicle.
O'Neill is unable to prove conclusively that Heather has no knowledge of what Roger Carroll did on that day in June when Bonnie disappeared.
I don't want them to come back in their interviews right now and say that Heather told us to do it.
No, I didn't tell him because I don't want nothing to happen to Bonnie.
Under questioning, she denies any involvement and seems very distraught by the possibility that Roger has something to do with Bonnie's disappearance. Without a body, a murder weapon, or a witness, Detective O'Neill's hands are tied.
Ultimately, if something did happen and there was foul play, trying a homicide without a body would be very difficult, and it's difficult to prove. So having only the fingerprint and a few conversations just wasn't enough for us to push it over.
Sharing this disappointing reality with Bonnie's family dredges up hard emotions.
Those conversations I had with the family was very difficult during that time and the years that had gone by without any new leads and nothing else. And at this point, the Carroll family had shut down. They did not want to speak to us any further, and we knew that there was nothing else that we could do at this point other than just wait.
And once again, the Bonnie Woodward case goes cold. Until a special prosecutor takes up the case file, almost by chance.
I was with the Madison County, Illinois State's Attorney's Office for 18 years. I personally became interested in cold cases that were in my office at the time. And I asked my supervisor if I could begin looking into some cold cases. The Bonnie Woodward case just happened to be the first one I pulled out.
After steeping herself in the facts, Jennifer Mudge is certain that Roger Carroll has gotten away with murder.
All we had was his prints on her car, and we did not have her body.
Faced with the same challenges Detective O'Neill confronted 8 years ago, Mudge realizes there's not much she can do. But 2 months later, she receives a phone call that changes everything.
They called me to tell me that Roger Carroll had attempted suicide. He had committed a domestic battery on his wife, Monica, and then he had walked off into the woods, injected himself with insulin, and a Jersey County Sheriff's deputy found him unresponsive, near death. He was taken to a hospital and arrested for the domestic battery.
And at that point, we thought this may be our time to try it again, to see if there's anything new that we can establish to get going with this case again on as far as Bonnie's disappearance. This may be our only opportunity to continue forward.
But it's not Roger he wants to focus on.
It was after that we reached out to Monica and ultimately explained to her our situation in the case. She was willing to speak to us at this time.
Investigators learn that Monica is divorcing Roger for infidelity.
We have been living separate in the home. Okay. He actually moved out of the bedroom, went to a separate part of the house. He connected up with a woman at work and had an affair.
And given the current state of her marriage, she's now willing to tell them everything she knows.
If Roger Carroll gets out, I am scared to death that he will come after me.
"47-year-old Bonnie Woodward has been missing for years, and the case has gone cold. With no body, the only piece of evidence, a set of fingerprints belonging to Roger Carroll, are not enough to convict.
I mean, no, there's no way that my fingerprints are on that car door or my DNA is on that car door. There just is no way.
Your prints are on that door.
But now, a new investigator interested in the case has stumbled onto a twist in Roger's life. He's just tried to commit suicide, and his wife Monica has some shocking information about him.
She was able to discuss several situations and circumstances with Roger, ultimately saying that Roger never came right out and told her that he is responsible for Bonnie's disappearance or death at the time.
He told me he didn't have anything to do with it. And so I believed him. At that point in my marriage,
she talked about a large fire that was being stoked on the property.
There was a big brush pile that he just burnt for a long time. And I'm talking days.
How far was this from the house?
Pretty close.
Monica's suspicions alone are not enough to move the needle forward. So they turn to another family member who may now feel free to talk with Roger behind bars.
We had a meeting, the investigators, myself and my co-counsel, and we thought the first person we would want to speak to would be the son. Because at the time of Bonnie's murder, the son was 16 years old. So fast forward 8 years later, his mom has just been beaten by his dad, and he might have some things to say about something that he saw back in 2010 that he, as a 16-year-old, would not have wanted to say.
But Nathan is unwilling to speak with detectives. However, he is willing to testify for a grand jury on one condition: that he be granted immunity. Nathan's testimony is nothing short of explosive. He claims that his father became increasingly enraged with Bonnie's alleged mistreatment of Heather and made it his mission to save her, unbeknownst to the runaway teen.
His dad told him that Bonnie, Heather's stepmom, had to go, that she was going to bring bad things their way, and that they had to take care of it. They stopped by Bonnie's house. They stopped by Bonnie's work. His dad specifically commented, "Good, she's at work." They went back to the house. His dad trimmed his beard, put a ball cap on, trimmed his fingernails, got one of the guns in the home, and left. A couple hours maybe later, Nathan says his father came home. He heard the car pull in the driveway, and he heard a few gunshots. Nathan was sitting at the kitchen table. When he walked out, he saw feet, and he remembered that there were scrubs on the feet, and Bonnie worked at a nursing home, so she wore scrubs every day. He walked around the corner, and he saw Bonnie Woodward laying on the side of the house, dead. He saw his dad shoot her one more time.
Freed from his father's controlling presence, Nathan unloads the terrible burden he's carried for years.
This is where she laid.
Okay. Roger obtained this front loader from their property and ultimately picked up Bonnie's body, took her back to what was described by Monica as the burn site. Her deceased body was burnt in an attempt to get rid of the evidence. Following these multiple days of burning, they took that same front loader, scraped off the top few inches of soil at that burn site, and then dumped these ashes and dirt into a nearby creek that runs through their property. And then he also walked us to this area as well to point out this area.
Where the ashes were dumped?
He took them on a walkthrough, showed them where she was shot, showed them where the burn pile was, and then he came with investigators back to the police department where they had seized all of Roger Carroll's guns.
We showed him several guns, and he did point out a 9mm semi-automatic handgun at the time, and he had said that that was the one that his father had used on that day.
Nathan's testimony is shocking, but it's not enough to convict his father without physical evidence. Police obtain another search warrant, and this time they know exactly where to look.
After we learned where to look for evidence, another massive search happened. This time I would say over 100 law enforcement officers went out to the scene.
It was a meticulous search that happened for 3 days. The area next to the house, which would be the site where she was ultimately shot and killed, we did find shell casings, at least one that was a 9mm shell casing, 9mm being the same gun that was used and Nathan identified. We also found a 9mm firearm projectile.
But investigators worry that the days-long fire may have destroyed any ballistic markings that would match the bullet to the 9mm. So they send the evidence to firearms experts for specialized testing.
Bullets, by their very nature, are designed to survive heat. When they are fired, they undergo the friction of rubbing up against the barrel, which produces a lot of heat. Also, they're exposed to a lot of heat when the cartridge itself is designated and the gases are burning beside them or behind them. So they're able to withstand a great deal of heat. They took that bullet from the crime scene and they compared it to test fires from the semi-automatic 9mm weapon, and they looked at it under a comparison microscope and determined that that bullet was fired from that weapon.
It's a perfect match. At long last, investigators finally have their murder weapon. But what they don't have is a body.
At the burn site, we found some more shell casings, but also what appeared to be charred remains of bone fragments.
The bone fragments are too damaged by fire to yield any DNA, but there's still enough to build a case. On the strength of ballistics testing, along with the fingerprints and Nathan Carroll's eyewitness testimony against his father, Roger Carroll is finally charged with the murder of Bonnie Woodward.
On June 25th, 2010, Roger W. Carroll lured Bonnie Woodward from Madison County to a location in Jersey County, where he then ended her life by shooting her, and then concealed her death by placing her in a fire and burning her remains.
Roger was charged in Jersey County with 3 counts of first-degree murder and aggravated kidnapping and concealment of a homicidal death.
The trial was lengthy. It's in essence a no-body homicide. We never really were able to locate Bonnie's body, which is something that, very rare that you ever see.
I believe that there have been less than 500 cases in the world that have been tried and convicted without a body. It's very, very rare to try a case without a body, let alone get a conviction without a body.
10 years after Bonnie vanishes, Roger Carroll finally faces a jury.
Ultimately, we went to trial on 1 count of first-degree murder. The jury deliberated for approximately 3 to 4 hours, I believe, and they convicted him of first-degree murder.
Roger was very controlling. That was confirmed with the statements. That was something that I even perceived as how this family was ran back in 2010 when this case first came to them, is that he had a really strong hold on this family, over his wife, over his son.
People have blamed Nathan as being complicit in this murder, and that just is not the case.
Nathan ultimately coming forward was a big step in the investigation. He certainly could have kept that quiet.
He was a boy who had a murderer for a father. He was scared. He did what his father told him to do. Not only is he not a murderer, but he's sort of a hero, because it took a lot of guts for him to stand up in that courtroom and tell the truth. We couldn't have done any of this without him and his statement.
With his conviction finally secured, Bonnie's family can begin healing from their decade-long trauma.
The family knew that Roger was responsible. And this was more closure for them, knowing that all these years of Bonnie disappearing, and some people out there were saying that Bonnie just walked away or she left, which they knew wasn't true. They knew that something happened to their sister, to their mother. And this was a good conclusion for them to kind of put this thing to rest and start to move on. As difficult as it is for them to do that,
she had a lot of people that loved her, and she gave a lot of love to a lot of other people as well. So her family, to say that they were with me every minute of every day of that trial is an understatement. I talked to every one of them multiple times per day. They were present for all of it, and they, I think, breathed a big sigh of relief when it was over.